now gorging themselves on trillions of American dollars in one bailout after another. They're also usurping the rights, duties, and powers of American Congress or Parliament. Again, Congress has put up little more than a whimper to their masters. Then came Barack Obama, who now has the power, the self-given power to fire CEOs and assume other employees of private companies at will. Prime Minister Putin, less than 2 months ago, mind you this was in 2009, warned Obama and UK's Blair not to follow the path to Marxism. It only leads to disaster. Apparently, even though we suffered 70 years of the Western-sponsored horror show, we know nothing as foolish, drunken Russians, so let our wise Anglo-Saxon fools find out the folly of their own pride. Again, the American public has taken this with barely a whimper, but a free-man whimper. So should it be any surprise to discover that the democratically controlled Congress of America is working on passing new regulation that will give the American Treasury Department the power to set fair maximum salaries, evaluate performance, control how private companies give out pay raises and bonuses. It says here, Senator Barney Franks, a social pervert basking in his homosexuality, of course, amongst the modern enlightened American social or societal norm as well as that of the general West. Homosexuality is not only not a looked down upon life choice, but is often praised as a virtue, and his Marxist enlightenment has led this effort. And finishing up with this article, the Russian owners of American companies and industries should look thoughtfully at the option of closing their facilities down and fleeing the land of the red as fast as possible. In other words, divest while there's still value left. The proud American will go down into his slavery without a fight, beating his chest and proclaiming to the world how free he really is. The world will only snicker. And private investigator Ross Perot warns America could be taken over. It's kind of a prophetic little announcement there. But, he's probably put there to give people maybe a choice of a third party. Never, kind of like Ron Paul, never really supposed to go there because the global mafia doesn't allow it. But he was talking about the sucking sound of jobs going overseas, which is what we've seen. He says, the last thing I ever want to see is our country taken over because we're so financially weak we can't do anything. He said nobody that's running as far as the elections really talks about it, the money spending, and about what we have to do and why we have to do it. They would prefer not to have it discussed. Then next up, Europeans must fight against global banking cartel. So global banking mafia, same thing, right? Chris Dorsey, an economist and banking analyst, said on Monday in an interview with Press TV that competitiveness is they control the system and the people in these nations. That's why I said human assets, right? Human resources. They fight over the scraps. It's ridiculous. Over here, he says, what's going on and what's driving all of this is not sovereign nations like Germany and Italy. It's institutions that control those governments. We're talking about think tanks and Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the RAND Corporation, all of these types of institutions. It's not the people inside those governments and the institutions that control the Eurozone countries. It's the European Central Bank, which takes orders from the Bank for International Settlements, right? In this country, in the U.S., it's the Federal Reserve Bank. These are private central banks. They have the same ownership. They make coordinated moves. Then Bear Stearns' email refers to bonds as a sack of shit or a bag of shit. We're going to leave you to hold a bag of shit, right? That's the old saying. But the bank kept foisting them on investors as a lawsuit. So a new lawsuit accuses Bear Stearns, now owned by J.P. Morgan, of knowingly pushing rotten mortgages securities onto investors before the financial meltdown. And UK health chief earns $366,000 on top of his salary amid recession. So it goes on, it says he's pocketed $366,000 on top of his government salary, total earnings to almost $500,000, which is 12 times more than the average nurse in the UK. And it's funny because, while he's making all that money, right, hospitals are letting patients die to save money so that he can get more. Hospitals are depriving elderly patients of food and drink to hasten their deaths as part of a cost-cutting measure to free up bed space, leading doctors warn. Remember this article about this story about not hiring smokers in Florida? We won't hire smokers, declared. So the beach policy, the Delray Beach town or city in Florida, is policy in place to save money. The messed up thing too is why don't they equate pharmaceutical stuff in there, right? Why don't they do that? Why are you taking Xanax? Are you taking something else? Why don't you have to declare pharmaceutical drugs? Why don't you have to declare that you have fluoride in your water? And you know what I mean? That should be equated too. See, it's discrimination, just like discrimination against people who go through toll booths, whatever, right? They're already discriminated because they have to if they decide to pay with cash and not go through the little Easy Pass and stuff like that, then they have to pay more than the other person. And now they're actually, if they're paying high denominations of bills, they'll actually detain them. And this is like when we look back, it'll be, well, these are changes, right? These are things that are changes, right? Grassroots and that. But it's not. It's what I've mentioned before. It's engineer consent and manufacturer consent. Manufacturer consent, they use the government against you with all these laws to force you to do something and then say it was democratic, even though you didn't have a flippin' say about it. And engineer consent is all those brainwashed sheeple who listen to television and stuff like that and get brainwashed, and then they actually convince themselves that what they're being told is the best thing for them, when it's really going to screw them and their fellow humans out and their future out. So they basically volunteer to do this, to allow it to happen. That's engineer consent. Renters have privacy and property rights too. Says Cato Legal Associate Sophie co-authored this blog, and saying that a person's home is a castle and thus affords certain protections and immunities, including the right to exclude unwanted visitors that apply whether you own or rent. So, yeah, this is true. Ordinance authorizing general administrative searches of rental properties have been increasing and adopted by local authorities with little protection for privacy interests. These searches take place even if both the landlord and tenant believe it's not necessary, and the owner of the property even has to pay a fee for the unwanted search to receive a rental license. Here's a perfect example of engineer consent to manufacturer consent. The city sometimes makes initial requests for consent, but these are mere courtesy because the city proceeds with an administrative warrant, i.e. force, threat of force, and the gun in your face in the event of a refusal without a showing of probable cause to believe there's a housing code violation or other problems. So then it becomes what?